All right, let's jump right into this explainer and explore the fascinating, larger-than-life history of a ruler who literally defines the word unyielding. We're talking about Maharana Pratap. He was a 16th century Rajput king, and his resistance against the massive Mughal empire has become the stuff of absolute legend. It's really a picture of a man who stood his ground when almost everyone else around him was capitulating. To really get the full picture of this epic story, we're going to break it down into 6 quick parts: the stand against an empire, the warrior and his tactics, the Battle of Haldighati, some amazing tales of unwavering loyalty, his code of fear, honor, and respect, and we'll wrap up with the legacy of unity. So, let's start with Section 1, the stand against an empire. To set the stage, picture the 16th century. A classic David versus Goliath situation is brewing. The Mughal Emperor Akbar had vastly expanded his territory all across India. But in the region of Mewar, things were playing out entirely differently. Akbar wanted Mewar desperately, and it wasn't just some ego trip, it was pure economics and strategy. Geographically speaking, Mewar was a vital choke point. It connected Delhi directly to the trade routes on the western coast. Basically, if Akbar wanted to import or export goods globally, he absolutely had to go through Mewar. And Maharana Pratap was standing right in the way, completely refusing to budge. The historical accounts actually show Akbar sent emissaries 8 different times, even offering Pratap half of India if he would just hand over Mewar. But Pratap said no. Well, when diplomacy fails, war becomes inevitable. And the odds here were just staggering. You had 80,000 imperial troops marching in under Akbar's command, going up against a fiercely loyal but tiny resistance of just 15,000 Rajput warriors. It was an ultimate clash. The sheer numbers heavily favored the empire, which meant Pratap had to rely on something else entirely to survive. Which brings us to Section 2, the warrior and his tactics. You see, Maharana Pratap wasn't just a king. The guy was a physical powerhouse. He was heavily shaped by his mother and first guru, Jayawanti Bai. She instilled this incredible sense of leadership and military strategy in him right from childhood, really preparing him for the insane burdens he'd eventually carry. I mean, just listen to these historical numbers. The man stood 7.5 feet tall. He went into battle wearing 70 kilograms of chest armor. That's the weight of a grown adult just in armor. He wore 10-kilogram shoes, wielded twin swords weighing 10 kilograms, and carried an 80-kilogram spear. He was carrying an immense amount of weight into battle, fighting with unimaginable physical strength. But strength alone doesn't defeat an empire. Strategy does. So how did he actually survive against those impossible odds? Well, he didn't sit in a fancy palace waiting to be besieged. He completely abandoned royal luxury. He literally went into the forests to live austerely among the indigenous Bhil tribes, eating off leaves and sleeping on the bare ground. Doing that earned their absolute unwavering loyalty. He also formed strategic alliances with Afghan leaders who opposed the Mughals. But his masterstroke was using the Aravalli Hills to launch highly effective guerrilla warfare. His forces would strike incredibly fast, vanish right back into the valleys, and constantly rebuild. That takes us to Section 3, the Battle of Haldighati. All this tension, the constant guerrilla strikes, the stubborn refusal to submit, it all finally exploded in 1576 at the terrifying Battle of Haldighati. Pratap's smaller force met the massive Mughal army head-on in this incredibly narrow mountain pass. During the chaos, Akbar's top commander, a towering guy named Balol Khan, engaged Pratap directly. According to the accounts, with one single devastating blow of his sword, Maharana Pratap sliced Balol Khan and the horse he was riding completely in two. It's a pretty wild image, right? And it perfectly cemented the sheer terror his name evoked among the enemy ranks. Let's move on to Section 4, Tales of Unwavering Loyalty. Now, these battles weren't just fought by men. The devotion of Pratap's animal companions is actually a huge legendary part of his historical aura. Think about the number 28 for a second. It represents 2 incredibly heartbreaking feats of devotion in his story. First, during that battle at Haldighati, Pratap's beloved blue horse, Chetak, had one of its legs severed by a sword attached to an enemy elephant's trunk. But despite that fatal injury, Chetak carried a wounded Pratap to safety, literally leaping across a massive 28-foot gorge before collapsing and dying. Then there's Pratap's fiercely loyal elephant, Ram Prasad. This elephant took down numerous enemy elephants before finally being captured. Akbar actually renamed the elephant and ordered it to be fed the absolute best food. But out of sheer grief for his master, Ram Prasad refused to eat or drink anything for 28 days until he finally died. That incident led to a really profound realization from the Mughal emperor himself. Akbar reportedly said, "How can I bow the head of a king whose elephant refused to bow to me?" It shows the absolute awe that Pratap's resistance commanded. Even his greatest enemy had to respect that unbreakable spirit. And that ties right into Section 5, fear, honor, and respect. You have to realize, beyond the physical warfare, this was a deep psychological battle, heavily defined by Pratap's unyielding moral code. He wasn't just feared as a fighter, he was deeply respected for his character. Take this incredible moment from 1580. One of Pratap's commanders launched a raid and actually ended up capturing the family, women and children included, of Akbar's powerful general Abdul Rahim Khan Khana. When Pratap found out, he was absolutely furious with his own commander. He immediately ordered that the enemy general's family be returned with the utmost respect and honor. He made it crystal clear. His war was strictly on the battlefield, not against women and children. But years of this grueling, endless guerrilla war, living out in the forests and fighting constantly, takes a toll. A rumor actually started circulating in the Mughal court that the exhausted king was finally ready to throw in the towel and surrender. A poet king named Prithviraj Rathore, who was an ally living under Mughal rule but secretly admired Pratap, was stunned by this. He actually wrote Pratap a letter basically asking if the lion was finally going to live with jackals. While Pratap's fiery response crushed any hopes of a surrender pretty much instantly, he fired back saying, "Clouds cannot stop the sun, jackals cannot tolerate a lion's strike. I will protect Mewar even if I starve." He made it known without a doubt that he would rather die out in the wilderness than give up his freedom. His spirit just could not be broken. Let's wrap up with Section 6, the legacy of unity. Over time, Akbar ended up shifting his military focus elsewhere, mostly to the southern and eastern parts of India. Taking full advantage of this, Pratap marched right out of the hills and successfully reclaimed almost all of his beloved Mewar. From his birth in Kambalgurd in 1540, through the intense battles, right up to his tragic passing in a hunting accident in 1597, he lived a life completely unbowed. And the historical accounts note a really powerful detail. When Akbar received the news of Maharana Pratap's death, the emperor actually wept. He mourns the loss of the one rival he respected above all others, the one king he just could never defeat. But we do have to acknowledge a hard, rather uncomfortable truth about this era. Pratap's immense struggle wasn't purely against the Mughals. A huge part of it was due to division among his own family and his fellow Rajput kings. Akbar was incredibly strategic. He managed to win over many of Pratap's relatives and neighboring kings, turning them against one another. It's a stark historical warning. When the house breaks, the neighbor loots. It was really that internal division and betrayal that made Mewar so vulnerable in the first place. And that brings us to the end of our explainer today. I want to leave you with this somewhat provocative thought based on the history we just covered. If a lack of unity is exactly what allowed empires to conquer, and if true strength really does come from standing together, what divisions are holding us back today? It's a powerful lesson in resilience, honor, and unity that definitely echoes far beyond the battlefields of the 16th century. Thanks for exploring this incredible piece of history with me.